Good evening. Welcome. Welcome to Friday Nights Live from the Parrish. My name is Corinne Erni. I'm the Senior Curator of ArtsReach and Special Projects at the Parrish. And I'm very pleased that we can still come together over these Friday night programs, even while our museum is closed. So I would like to thank our sponsors who make these programs possible, the presenting sponsor, Bank of America, as well as Sandy and Stephen Pearlbinder. Tonight, it is my distinct pleasure to be speaking to two extraordinary women, both of whom I have been working with. One of them is Tomashi Jackson. She's our platform artist for this year at the Parrish, and she will be creating new work for an exhibition that will open in July. My other guest tonight is Minerva Perez. She is the Director of OLA. That's the Latin American organization of Eastern Long Island. So welcome, Tomashi and Minerva. It is such a pleasure to bring you together for tonight's conversation. So I would like to start with Tomashi. I came across Tomashi's work and her personality about 4 years ago, and I was really struck by the power and the beauty of her work and the way she was able to marry aesthetics and politics in just amazingly beautiful work to tell the story of people whose stories normally don't get told. So when we started talking about doing a project at the Parrish, Tomashi asked me, she's like, what's going on in the Hamptons? And I was like, well, you know, the Hamptons, it's a beautiful place. It's where the rich and famous live, and we have a thriving artist community. But there's also something missing. And I just felt like there was an erasure. There was almost like an infrastructural segregation of people who are not supposed to be seen in the Hamptons. And so, of course, that caught Tomashi's attention. And just about exactly a year ago, we invited Tomashi to come out to the Hamptons and to meet with historians and leaders from these various communities whose stories we want to tell. And so she met with community leaders from the Shinnecock Nation. As you may know, it's right here in Southampton, leaders from the Black communities, as well as from the Latinx communities. And so that was obviously Minerva Perez. And so I'm really pleased to have you here tonight, Tomashi, in preparation of your upcoming exhibition, which you are calling The Land Claim. And I know you are doing a lot of research, a lot of interviews with people from the communities. You're unearthing archives to find these stories and to create amazing work. And I'm also really pleased, and I want to give a shout out to the Watermill Center, because you're going to be their Ingemar and Otto Fellow in May, and you will have a month there to basically create and finish the work that you will be doing for the Parrish. So welcome, Tomashi, and I look forward to your introduction to your work.
Thanks, Corinne. And thank you everyone who's with us. Hi, Aristides. We wish that we could see you all, and I look forward to a time after the vaccine has been properly distributed and there's enough of us who are vaccinated so that we can be together again. In a lectern, in a gallery, in the museum, in the fields, but together again. But in the meantime, I'm really touched and honored to be invited back to the Parrish Museum for another Friday Nights Live, another amazing conversation with another extraordinary member of the community on the East End of Long Island for this project titled The Land Claim. And I too would like to express my appreciation for the Watermill Center. I can't wait to be there with the wonderful people there. I'm so honored to be a fellow this year in any capacity. So let's get started. We should get started, yeah. We have so little time, and I really want to spend as much time with Minerva as possible. So my name is still Tomashi. I'm a visual artist, identify as a painter, and I work across media. Hi, Jess. Oh, I'm gonna get distracted by the chat, I see that. Yeah, welcome all, welcome all. Yeah, so I'm a visual artist, I identify as a painter, And we're gonna look at just a few works that were so kindly selected by Corinne for us to look at. So these first images are from my most recent exhibition at the Wexner Center for the Arts in Columbus, Ohio. That show is called, it was called Love Roller Coaster, titled after one of the songs that titled the works that are there. All the titles of the works are taken from songs from the Ohio Players catalog of music. Thanks, Victor. This is Time and Space, 1948, end of voter registration line, 1965, LBJ signed the Voting Rights Act. This project focused on voting rights and experiences in democracy. It was a continuation of work around democratic processes that began with my previous show that we'll get to. So this opened right before the last election in Ohio, and the pieces are made of voting ephemera from American elections from all over the country, with a very special emphasis on elections that took place in Ohio. But there's also a lot of ephemera from Georgia and from Florida. We can go to the next one. The surfaces are made of those ephemera, fabrics that I brought back to the United States with me from Athens, Greece, where I had the honor of being an artist resident at the Arc Athens residency. And they're also embedded with marble dust, Pentelic marble dust, taken from the quarry that supplies marble for the continued restoration of the sacred Greek monuments, after which American monuments of democracy are fashioned. And the surfaces are embedded also with soil from the Lucy Depp Park, an important and one of the rare preserved sites of the Underground Railroad in the United States. And then the images that are overlaid, can we go back to the other one, Victor? I know I promised I'll be brief, and I will be. The images that are overlaid with the paintings are images taken from the signing of the Voting Rights Act in 1965. So what we're able to see here is Lyndon Baines Johnson signing the Voting Rights Act. They're printed with archival ink onto PVC vinyl, inspired by the bodega refrigerated flaps that I would see in New York City when I lived there on a regular basis. We can go to the next one. So together the colors intersect and they create new colors and cross-hatching for the viewer who's able to see them up close especially. But yeah, let's keep going. So then those works were an extension of work that was shown in Los Angeles at the Night Gallery. And I should say I'm represented in New York by Tilton Gallery, and I'm represented in Los Angeles by Night Gallery. So this is my first solo show at Night Gallery. Let's go to the pictures. Forever My Lady was the title of the show. That's the debut album from my favorite boy band in the 90s, which is Jodeci. And Forever My Lady, I don't talk about this very much, but that is a song that was written by Al B. Shore for the late Kim Porter and was given to Jodeci and became like a very important song for them, for that band. So that was one of my favorite songs when I was a little girl. And so this is when I first started using the Pentelic marble dust, the Greek fabrics. I also use paper bags, and they're all fused together on the surface. There's a word that I'm looking for. They're laminated. Yeah, so they're all laminated together, and then the bags are used to wrap around these awning style structures that are made in Los Angeles by the brilliant Ruben Palencia, and sometimes with Nadia's help as well. Really amazing people. The awnings are meant to echo architectural extensions that we experience in the built environment on a regular basis, domestic spaces, retail spaces. Awnings are, essentially like structures wrapped in canvas that provide shelter for the body and can alter the experience of natural or artificial light. And in this image, painted into the surface is a documentary photograph taken by Eugene Richards of two addicted people in the 1990s from his series called Cocaine True, Cocaine Blue. And then the image that cross hatches with that image in the Mylar strips, thank you, Dugal Image Solutions, in the Mylar strips that fall and cascade across the surface are of my two sisters, my big sister and my little sister, taken in downtown Los Angeles by my mother sometime in the early 1990s. Okay, let's keep going. So this is, I'm not gonna get like super into this work. It's hard for me to talk about because it's some of the most personal work that I've made in a really long time. But what I'm juxtaposing here to be rather simple is our images of I'm mixing family archival images with documentary images of things that were taking place at the same time. And then also in the gallery are paintings that that focus on idealistic images of democracy or the democratic process and the democratic process in the United States, and images of the violent realities of what the responses have been historically for Black and Brown and Indigenous people seeking full democratic rights in what is said to be a democratic society. So this is an image of the Freedom Riders bus being bombed in Alabama by the KKK that is merged with another image of Lyndon Baines Johnson signing the Voting Rights Act with Martin Luther King looking on. We should go to the next one. Yeah, this is one of my favorites from that project. Restraint of Pen and Tongue, Shady Grove church bombing in Georgia. So all of these I focused on images from the signing of the Voting Rights Act, and then focused on finding images of terrorism in response to attempts to register voters and merge them in this method. I also consider these color studies. I'm trying to merge colors that create optical illusions when they intersect, like blues and reds, or greens and reds, oranges and blues, violets and yellows. Yeah, I love this piece. We should go to the next one. That's Nicoletta from Night Gallery, looking at Temple for Bakari, Shady Grove church bombing. And this piece is about and dedicated to the Henderson family, the family of Bakari Henderson, who lost his life while visiting Greece not too long ago. Yeah, Bakari is Bakri, Henderson, Henderson. This piece, this is the first time that I've made a piece that was, this is the only piece in that entire body of work that was the surface was completely covered in marble dust and painted into all of the way. In the other pieces, the marble dust was added as like a geometric affirmation of the shape of the thing that came out of the collaging of the surface. And with this one, I painted directly into marble from edge to edge, which was important for me. It's, I feel myself getting emotional now. I just encourage everyone to know this young man's name and to look up his story. His family is still seeking justice for his death. He was yeah, I'm just gonna let people look that up for themselves. But in this image it's an image of Bakari around the time of his high school graduation. And it intersects with an image of his parents embracing after his killers were not found guilty of murder, after beating him to death on a public street that was all recorded on closed captioned television. So it was important for me to, having been able to visit Greece and come back, and I really enjoyed myself there, and I very much loved it there. My entire time being there, I thought about these issues of democracy, and I thought about what it means to be a Black person seeking peace and democratic experiences internationally. So I was always thinking about him. So it was important for me to make a piece honoring his life and his family's experience, having been there. And it was really important for me to paint fresco style to paint his image into marble. That was important for me to do. Let's go to the next one. Thanks. Okay, we're rounding it out. So these pieces are from Time Out of Mind, at Tilton Gallery and the Whitney Biennial of 2019, curated by Rujeko Hockley and Jane Panetta. So this piece, I really loved making this work. This work was inspired by articles that I found in a paper, an online periodical called Kings County Politics. I was in New York most of the time at that time, and I don't know how I came across these articles about the third party transfer program that I had never heard of before, but I read one article, and one article led to 2 to 3 to 4. Kelly Mena, Stephen Witt, and Shubhasa Berg were the 3 journalists that I began to follow incessantly, Shubhasa being the photographer, and Kelly and Stephen being the writers and the researchers, who were the only people at the time, the only people in all of the boroughs in the entire city, following stories of fully paid for properties being seized by the city and handed over to third-party not-for-profits that were shells for developers, fully paid for properties. So when I heard about this story, I immediately thought of Seneca Village, which had been a place where free Black people owned properties, in some cases many properties, lived there, rented out properties there in antebellum New York. And so in this piece, Mary Lyons, Yudi Ventura, and the Co-op women, Red Line, Red Scare, the images that began to intersect on the vinyl, on the PVC vinyl, are images of Mary Lyons, who was one of those landowners in Seneca Village, in what is now the west side of Central Park. And then this image of her is broken up into pieces and intersects with Yudi Ventura and the Co-op women, members of a co-op in Williamsburg at the time that was organizing in 2019 to save their property from being seized by the city in the third-party transfer program. Next image. Another one of my favorites. Corinne, you really have a knack for picking my favorites. This is Red Light District, Orange Juice, Supreme Court of Brooklyn protest. Yeah, I just really loved this piece. I was also using buttons at the time. Who was I thinking about? There's an artist whose name is escaping me right now. It's really embarrassing. But at the time I was really preoccupied with figuring out how I needed to move color across the surface, whether I needed to like soak and stain the surfaces that I was making. I was trying to figure out a lot of stuff, and this was one of the successful places I felt like I arrived at, where I began to wash the surfaces with color. Yeah, I just really love this piece. So, and what happens when I'm working with research this way is that I identify images that I can use, and like Rodin, I reuse them again and again. So here again, there's a piece of an image of Mary Lyons that intersects with stripped images taken from Shubhasa Berg's photojournalism of the Supreme Court of Brooklyn protest people continuing to fight to save their homes from the insane practices of clustered foreclosure that were taking place at the time that led to a class action lawsuit that won some people back their properties, but not everyone. Next slide. Make 2 Black property owners look like one. Limited value exercise, Mr. Lyons and Mr. Dorsey. So, quite simply, this is a Joseph Albers inspired limited value exercise to make 2 colors look like one. These are 2 different reds that intersect, 2 halftone line images printed at the Robert Blackburn studio in New York City of Albro Lyons, husband of Mary Joseph Lyons, whose names were found on the demolition documents of Seneca Village. So there are no images of Seneca Village, which was very difficult for me to work with, but I was able to find images of Mr. and Mrs. Lyons because they were significant abolitionists of the time, and they owned property of Seneca Village. And I should also say that property ownership for Black men during that time was a condition of suffrage. So a lot of people owned property there and rented it out so that they would be able to vote. So this image intersects with McConnell Dorsey's image, this photograph taken by Shubasa Berg. Yeah, that's it. 2 Black property owners who lost their property to the city and never got it back. Color study, Mayor doubles down. There are buttons on the back of this knitted work, headlines from the articles that Kelly and Stephen were writing at the time. One of them being an article covering all of the wildness that came from these revelations about the third-party transfer program. And in the midst of all that, the mayor of New York doubled down on his promise to continue to use the third-party transfer program to seize properties. And what did he say? To bring respect back to neighborhoods that they deserve. This was only happening in Black and brown neighborhoods that were quickly gentrifying. So those buttons are placed around this object that I knitted and wrapped around this form. This is one of the early experiments of using a more shallow version of the awning inspired structures. And then of course, again, these images printed in multiple colors on the vinyl, then they cascade over the color study and create new colors with their interactions. Next one. And then finally, Hometown Buffet, 2 Blues, Mr. Ronald Callender's building, Seneca Villagers, limited value exercise. Still thinking of Rainisha. And when I say I'm still thinking of Rainisha, it means I'm still thinking about Rainisha McBride. Lots of buttons. The buttons I used, I had to do a lot of research to find any images that I could use. And at the time, the good people at the Cooper Union library, the school library, are the ones who directed me to read The Park and the People, and any other books that were in the library around the making of Central Park. So I took some of those images, drawings of the park as a no man's land, and then the images that that were found by the researchers that created the book, The Park and the People. It was published in 1996, that unearthed the demolition documents of Seneca Village. So those, yeah, I was trying to figure something out here. And this is from the Whitney Biennial. This is one of my favorite pieces out of my 3 pieces that were in the Whitney book, curated into the Whitney Biennial. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Tomashi. I'd like to invite Minerva to talk about her work.
Good evening, everyone. I'm really happy to be here and wonderful to talk with Corinne and get to talk again with Tomashi. I enjoy every time I get to talk and listen to you and get to see your work, and I can't wait to see it in person. So I am the Executive Director of OLA of Eastern Long Island, and I'll share some images with you that just kind of give you a snapshot of some of the work that OLA does. It's a Latino-focused nonprofit in existence on the East End of Long Island since 2002, and serving the entire East End of Long Island with a focus on Latino and Latino immigrants, but the work that we do is definitely for the betterment, the health, and the equity of the entire East End. So I'd love to show you some images. This is a series of portraits that Philippe Cheng, a wonderful photographer and artist, offered to us in a way for us to share the many faces of OLA, basically our entire East End. What does it mean, you know, to be Latino, to be a part of what we do? We've got many volunteers and supporters and clients, and so this series of portraits, beautifully done by Philippe. This is one of them. Next, sorry. This was part of a workshop that we presented to the community called Your Path to Success. And what we very often try to do is really make sure we've got spaces for people to dream and have visions, visions of their own future, visions of the future of for their families and our community. And these members of this workshop created, this is part of the vision boarding exercise. The entire workshop lasted about 6 weeks. And it was just wonderful to get to interact with everyone and be inspired. I'm constantly inspired. This is an image from that. Next. This is a flyer that went out during a very difficult time over the last 4 years, where it was sort of a sudden change happened with regard to our local law enforcement and our Sheriff of Suffolk County deciding that it was going to be correct to honor administrative warrants to perform search and seizures without a judicial warrant, which is against our Constitution. Yet it was a very dark time because our leadership and our local law enforcement felt that they had to follow suit. They did not. So we had brought many meetings and the public to our town boards in East Hampton and Southampton, and put as much information and as much public voice as we could on how this is damaging the trust and damaging our peaceful community. And so the end result of this and a lot of our advocacy for 2.5 years of fighting that change in policy and protocol, I think it was good that we did everything we did. I think what ultimately changed it was the lawsuit against the Sheriff of Suffolk County that changed the practices, and that was brought by NYCLU and won. And after that, it was deemed now not appropriate for law enforcement to honor administrative warrants. There were some other things involved in this as well, making sure that people, victims, and witnesses to crime had the ample ability to communicate with law enforcement, whether they were speaking Spanish, Portuguese, French, Italian, whatever. So our OLA's urging to make sure that there are devices, but phones in every patrol car so that people can, so officers can use that as a tool for communication, de-escalation, and building trust and community. Next. This is we partnered up with CME, the Children's Museum of the East End, with Leah Oppenheimer, amazing social worker and teacher and community activist, I will say. And we did a series of workshops and creative workshops with children. And we were doing exercises kind of on fear, your Pandora's box. What is in your Pandora's box? And these were children from the ages of about 6 to maybe about 11, maybe 12. And this was a little, about an 8-year-old, he's 8 years old. And number 1, you see what we have here. Trump, heights, war, school, killer clowns, car crash, moving, tsunami, death, old, and hungry. We have a lot more of those, but next. This is some community members' living room where we sat when we were doing, we get involved in civic organization around letting people know more about voting, who's running, what they need to do to get to their polling site, all the information around voting and the civic engagement and being involved in civic engagement. Certainly not for any one particular party. We're a nonpartisan organization. But this was one evening where we sat for about 4 or so hours calling and speaking to Latino voters in particular about issues and about where they needed to go to vote, and answering any questions about what these particular positions actually did, the responsibilities of of these particular positions. I believe this may have been actually for a school board election. So these were volunteers that came together to do this. This is an ongoing offering of fresh produce that is happening over in Amagansett with Quail Hill Farm and I believe Balsam Farm, but correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure somebody will, but I think it's Quail Hill is the #1 farm that we're working with. And the young woman to the left is Frances. She had been volunteering with us and also interning with us for a while. And recently we're just able to hire her on in a full-time position. But she's the reason why this is working. She's actually there every single Sunday, even now in the middle of the winter, and whatever produce these farms have that they're not, that they have on a Sunday are given out for free to our family members in the area that are hurting for food. And oftentimes the pantries don't necessarily have the produce or the meats or the dairy. Sometimes they do, but every single week, Frances is there to make sure families are getting produce, and the folks that can't get to her, she now has about 7 families that she delivers boxes of produce to on that Sunday when she's done working and being available to the public. This is an image of Jack Lester and members of our staff, Erica Padilla to his left, our right. She is our administrative assistant. OLA has a staff of only 6 people, including myself. This is a meeting that we had with members of a 2-building complex in the Southampton Village, very tawny area. And this is a building that was in the middle of a foreclosure. And in the midst of all that, the beginning of the winter, it meant that they had no way of understanding who was going to be responsible for the heat because the heat was not working properly. The septic systems were overflowing so that the ground where children would walk home from school or maybe ride their little bikes was seeping up with sewage, and sewage was coming through their sinks and their bathtubs. And we got involved. Jack Lester is a pro bono tenant advocacy lawyer who's been doing this work for 40 years and does it for us for free. So we were able to gather them together at the Southampton Arts Center. So thank you to them. And we made sure everyone was safe and just talked about what he could do to advocate on their behalf to the bank to make sure that someone was going to be responsible for the heating and the sewage, and that they were not going to be left to this on their own or pitted against each other, because it was also determined that the prior landlord, before defaulting on the note, was illegally increasing their rent. Of course, there are no leases because many times there aren't leases out here, but increasing the rent with no notice whatsoever, and to a large degree, I mean a large percentage. And so Jack was able to advocate, and OLA, of course, supported that. He was doing the effort with OLA, and we worked with them for a number of months. We eventually paid to have the sewage pumped out. And then luckily a new owner came on board, and we just found out as of, I think, a day or so ago, that he's in the middle of writing up leases for every single one. There's about 15 different apartments that comprise those 2 different buildings. One of the family members that we learned had a young man home from college. He was helping to do some interpretation for some of the families, and he was home from his first year in Harvard. So this 1-room house that you probably wouldn't think one person could be in, it housed a mom, a dad, and this young boy and his sister, sent this boy to Harvard. This is our community, and this is why we fight so hard. Next. This is a mobile unit. It's a COVID testing mobile unit that OLA had been working a while on trying to secure some type of mobile testing, because in our areas out here, there have been very little access to free testing. Some a little bit more so in the area of Southampton Town, but in East Hampton Town, there were no free mobile testing offerings at all. And yet people definitely have COVID. They're suffering from it. Families are suffering from it, but because of the lack of testing, the lack of access to doctors, the lack of reporting, the difficulty in transportation, it means that our numbers are not what they really are. So we are not being counted, and therefore any kind of vaccine rollouts happening next are not going to adequately take into consideration the lacking and the lower numbers that don't represent the truth. This is a really happy image that I'm glad is included here. These are our scholarship recipients. We have started a very robust scholarship program that came to a crashing halt during 2020, but in 2019, we were able to offer 6 scholarships. One person is not being shown here. 6 scholarships, 4-year scholarships to these students that had sent in applications and we felt were the right people to choose. We have a committee to make those choices. And these were just tremendous young people who are, of course, our future and their parents. So we brought them into our offices. We have an office in the East Hampton on Main Street in Newtown, and we were able to talk about the process and what came next. And they continue to bring such pride and happiness to us. And we look forward to doing more and offering more scholarships in the future. This is an image from a protest march that was done. 2 of them have been done, and hopefully they never have to be done again, with the topic of family separation at the border, the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship Hall, and several other organizations and nonprofits and individuals were involved. Kathy Engel involved also in putting together this gathering of people. We wanted to make sure that what we did was definitely something where you could bring children and children could participate and not feel thoroughly scarred by whatever that looked like. So we found that it was going to be important to highlight some of the children in our community. And in this picture, that banner was actually put together as part of a sort of a banner making sort of bringing out your voice workshop at Watermill Center. So we also enjoy working at Watermill Center, and Andrea, we were able to bring families to work on different felt projects and banners. And one of the banners that we worked on together was this one. So Keep Families Together. And this was in Sag Harbor. And these 3 young girls, 2 of whom actually were singing. They were singing as we marched around Sag Harbor several times. It was extremely hot. They were very, very hot, but they did not stop singing the entire time. And around the little girl in the middle, around her neck, is a little speaker system. And they were singing songs in Spanish and in English. And it was wonderful and heartbreaking. And we hope to never have to do it again. We have to change our policies at the border. This is an image of our survey. For a while, OLA has been engaging in mental health workshops for families, understanding that the trauma of the last 4 years has taken our community and just ripped it apart. It is not fully broken. It is still strong, but mental health was a concern of ours for a while. Ever since we did mental health workshops and we learned that 6-year-old children were touching their families in the middle of the night every 2 hours to make sure they still were there. So because of COVID, we realized that the isolation factors that already existed before in our communities or in our vulnerable communities, with lack of access to transportation and fear around transportation, that we knew that was really going to be impacting our children, our adolescents to a kind of a pretty horrible degree. So we created this survey, which is the first of its kind in a regional context. It asks middle and high school students that are currently in middle and high school or had been pretty recently, so 12 to 29-year-olds, to talk in an anonymous way about what their struggles have been and how they've countered those struggles, if they have. What kind of ways did they reach out for mental and emotional health support? What are the barriers? What would they like to see happen? What are their dreams about that? What would it look like if middle and high school students had access to mental and emotional health support? We asked that question. We didn't expect that the write-in requests that we had would be used as much as they've been. And so right now we are kind of blown away, not terribly surprised, but blown away with the responses. And we are continuing this study and this survey at least into the end of the school year. So this is going to be an act of social justice and action to change some of the protocols. And not schools are not the only issue. The issues that we all have across our East End is that there are very siloed systems, 24 East End districts, 10 police departments, and no one really listens to youth. And as a 54-year-old woman, my goal is to make sure that I'm always making a space for youth at whatever table I'm at, And what we need to do right now is use this survey as the voice of all the youth that have taken their time to fill this out. And we need to change some protocols. It doesn't mean money, but it means that we change what we're doing so more youth have access to mental health support in the way that they need it. And we're working very hard on that right now. And this last image is a reminder of what what I need to do more often is just sit and breathe. But OLA, have been lucky enough to be recipients now as this FEMA-funded New York State initiative called Project Hope, which is a crisis counseling program. It has allowed us to bring together 2 different teams of crisis counselors and 2 team leads who are both MSWs, so that we can serve the entire East End of Long Island. We have 19 people hired right now. We'll have 1 more hired to fill out our team. So we have a total of 20. We've got folks hired from Shinnecock Nation, African American, Latino, and white. We want to fully represent our East End community to make sure that they know that we are here for them. So this is a line you can call, the 500-0837 number, and you'll be connected with a crisis counselor. It's anonymous. It's completely anonymous. It is confidential and it's free. And this gives you a chance to just talk about what's going on. Someone's there to listen and connect you to resources that might work for you. And this is community members helping community members. And it's very important for OLA that we are a part of that and a part of the solution and a part of the healing for our entire East End. And this is for everyone. So we're very excited about that work. Thank you.
Minerva, thank you so much for sharing your work with us. And I know this is only the tip of the iceberg from the many conversations that we've had. And I know you work across communities to bring everybody together. And I think that is what's so important. And I'm really pleased that we as the parish can be a platform to reveal the work that you do, the important work that you do, and that matters for all the communities out on the East End. So I would like to invite Tomashi to join the conversation. And I know that you have had conversations prior to this public talk. And I just wanted to know, what have you been discussing? Where is OLA right now? Because I'm sure a lot has changed since you met the first time last year.
Yes, a lot has changed. I think we started speaking, Tomashi, before this pandemic even hit, right? And I would say that right now, a lot of our focus is very much in kind of the health, in the housing, in how people are able to have equitable access to pieces of our society that just allow them to live fully. So right now that means access to testing, to vaccines, to mental health care, to some sort of housing, faith that you're not going to be living in necessarily in the woods, and maybe for some folks they choose that, but some families right now are facing a tsunami of evictions. A lot of our community members are. We've got a lot at stake right now, and the thing about it is that excites me and doesn't crush me is that we can do something about it. We can make sure that in a local context that we are holding our communities close to our hearts and not just throwing our hands up in the air and saying, well, it's a pandemic, what are you going to do? We can do.
Yeah, Minerva, thank you so much. I just feel compelled to just continually saying thank you to you and to Corinne for bringing us together. And thank you again to everyone who's here with us. There's so many special people in the room that we can't see. More just amazing people who themselves do amazing advocacy work and are raising families in spite of all of this. I'm overwhelmed. But yeah, Minerva, January 31st, I'm in the notebook where I took my notes the day that we met, literally brought to each other in a whirlwind of activity between meetings at Starbucks on the East End of Long Island. And yeah, January 31st, Minerva Perez right here. And when we first began our conversation, I was particularly interested in what Corinne had told me about the profiling that was happening of Latinx drivers that was leading to, let me see, I'm just gonna go back to my notes here. There is no public transportation to speak of. Bus service ends at 7 p.m., doesn't start early enough or run regularly. Excessive police stops increased as bus lines were cut across the county. ICE-related family separation increased significantly then in 2018 and 2019. OLA runs a free transportation service for health-related appointments for families that cannot afford private transportation or cannot wait for long public Medicare transport. But now there is a driver's license law for easier access to driving legally for those who can afford a car. Police at one point set up a checkpoint in East Hampton in front of an elementary school to ticket parents who were going to drop off their children.
It was a high school, but
it was a high school. Thank you. High school. Yeah. So that's what we were talking about then. And then when and then things got really crazy, like right after that, or the pandemic changed everything. And so since then, we've been able to reunite in our conversation. And what continues to come to the fore for me as I listen to you, as I have the opportunity to listen to you, and to listen to what's happening with the work, as I'm trying to visualize some of these experiences for these new works to be shown at the Parrish, what continues to come to the fore is still issues of housing, transportation, livelihood, migration, and agriculture. And so with the little time that we have left, I just wanted us to zero in on housing and mobility. So a year ago, we were talking about transportation and the experience of danger in mobility, or as you said when you were describing your work, fear around transportation, and then also housing as sites of respite. And these are areas of interest that I'm using to look and listen and draw from the lived experience of Latinx community, of Shinnecock people, and of Black people on the east end of Long Island. So in our most recent conversation from today, that's what I'm seeing, is a lot of work continuing to be done around this issue of mobility, with health being a link, mental health and nutritional health being linked, housing and transportation. But this work that you've done recently, that the organization has done recently around COVID testing, since that has changed our conversation, that's changed the conversation for all of us. Can you tell us a little bit more about the mobile testing unit and, using this issue of decreased mobility for vulnerable communities, using that issue to answer it with mobility and access to health?
Well, the isolation factor out here is pretty significant, and given the fact that this pandemic is something that is not only affecting certain portions of our community, but all of them, and there's no way to separate, or there's no conscionable way to try to separate who deserves to be healthier than others, and somehow that we could do that separately. It has to work together. But surprisingly, for me, still, that not enough urgency is placed on those situations that we've already identified as barriers to other types of healthcare, or getting children to pediatric visits, or getting women to their OBGYN appointments, or cancer patients to their cancer treatments. We've already identified that. That's why about 2 years ago or so, we started this medical transportation service. And now with COVID, certainly it's only gotten 10 times harder. And when we were hoping that things would happen a little bit sooner with some of the free testing, and it didn't, we had to reach out. We had to reach out as directly as we could. And there are some contacts that we work with at the county level, and more that we're developing at the state level. And we continue to talk with our towns and our villages. But we recognize that there's sometimes almost an advocacy type of knife that can sometimes cut through something. I don't think that it's always the solve. It's not the systemic solve that we want. And we don't look at that one action and say, oh, we solved it. But sometimes we've got to take that advocacy quicker way in and say, let's make sure that at the very least, some of our most vulnerable can be tested, can understand if they have this virus or not. And in areas such as Springs, which is an area that's populated by, and there are a number of Latinos that live in Springs, that we wanted to make sure that a mobile testing unit was brought out there, and we were able to work with the county to make that happen. And that was, it was critical. We had to do the scheduling for that because it was a pretty quick action and it was the only way to really get it done. So our staff, Erica Padilla and Francis was involved in that. Everyone was involved in that. Wally, Alma, Sandra, myself, to make sure that within 2 days we had 80 slots completely filled. Not all of them Latino, of course. We made sure to reach out to the American Legion, all the senior services and all the people that were working with seniors that we know, to make sure that folks that needed this, that were having a hard time getting out of the area because transportation is an issue, that we were going to have this available. And so we were able to work with the Springs Church, Presbyterian Church, and they were lovely and said, yes, we needed just a parking lot because they were going to bring a mobile unit. We were hoping that it wouldn't snow or pour, and it didn't. And so we were able to do this in a very orderly fashion. You know, we had, which is a bit of a heartbreak, and I won't go into the exact details, but I will say that we did reach out to another organization, sort of an organization that is known for its care of the community, or its mission to care for the community. We reached out to them and we said, you've got maybe a better parking lot. You're in a great location. Can we bring this mobile unit in, knowing that we're going to have people walking in or maybe driving in and then driving back out. We're not having anyone linger. There's no one gathering. We're very careful about that. And this particular organization said no. And I had asked, can you please consider, if you can't do it for this, what about in the future when we have vaccines that we're gonna have the same problems of access points and transportation? Can you be there for us to maybe use if there were vaccines that could be administered? And they said no, not now, and we don't feel comfortable now or in the future. No questions about traffic patterns or how we would handle that, which of course we had all that figured out. No question, no desire to have a conversation. And this is something that we will go back and look into and see if we can't change that or get some other understandings. But it is hard when you're in the middle of something like this that we're all experiencing, and many members of our community were the ones and are the ones that are the essential workers, that are working in grocery stores, that are working in restaurants, that are making this place the beautiful place that it is. And they were also 75% of the people at the Southampton hospital at the height of the pandemic that were doing the worst were Latinos. And yet when it comes time to roll something out to make sure our entire community is safe and cared for, it hurts. It hurts. So what the goal of OLA is to not take that hurt and lead with that hurt, or not take that hurt and turn it into anger and lead with that, but maintain the love of this community, all of this community, and work hard to make the right things happen. And we'll continue to do that.
In my notes, I have here some from our recent conversations. Some are still trying to insist that these matters can be systemically separated by racial distinctions, as if some problems are just problems of those people. Yes. And an airborne viral pandemic, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. And something that I love about the fact that when Corinne invited me to consider making a show for the Parrish Museum, when I asked her what was going on, she immediately started talking about you. And then she started talking about what was happening with the Shinnecock people and with the Black people on the East End of Long Island. And the more that I've gotten to learn about your work and about the organization, you've been so generous with me. You've been so generous with me. The more I get to see patterns, you know, because I've been in exile from my studio in New York, so I have to see patterns wherever I can see them until I can get into a space like this and work on a wall again. And the patterns that I continually see They come back to issues of housing as a site of respite and care for community. They come back to issues of transportation, of agriculture and livelihood. And the work of OLA comes back to focusing its beam of light on one of the most vulnerable and essential communities on the East End of Long Island. And in the process of doing that work, the advocacy actually benefits everyone. It's like what they say about the importance of focusing on focusing advocacy on people like Black women, you know, because if Black women are doing okay, everybody else is going to do better, you know? So it's, you know, like that principle that if the right work, if we're in our right minds and focus our attention on the communities that are the most vulnerable, everyone will benefit. And here we are, you know, here we are at this jumping off point, right? With an airborne viral pandemic. It is absolutely a fact that there is no one who can be overlooked for everyone to survive, for everyone to be well. And I also have here in my notes that the most vulnerable members of this community are the very people who are continually expected to continue to work in service and yet have no access to free testing. So the health of the Latinx, the health of the Shinnecock, the health of the Black families on the East End of Long Island impacts the health of every member of the East End of Long Island community. So thank you so much for your work, Minerva, and I appreciate every opportunity I get to have to spend some time with you.
Thank you. I feel the same way. Thank you.
And thank you, Tomashi, for, you know, bringing all of these issues together and showing that we're all connected. You know, there are certain issues that are specific to certain communities, but there are a lot of issues that are connecting all of us, actually, that are connecting certain communities. And I think it's amazing that you can bring that all together. I mean, you have started interviewing people, you saw certain issues that connect these communities, but also that connect all of us. And I think through your work, through the beauty of your work, people will be able to see that, to be touched by it, and to you know, bring a certain curiosity to the museum and when they look at your work. And I also want to mention that we're building an archive with you where you record the interviews that you had with all of these community leaders, historians, and so forth. We're collecting images, drawings, and so forth. And all of that will be available online. And, you know, in a way, the pandemic was almost a blessing in disguise that we had more time to prepare for that work and just to make it a lasting archive that will continue to live on after the exhibition. So I really want to thank you for bringing that to us, to the Hamptons. And again, Minerva, thank you for all your unbelievable work and for your partnership. So I would like to invite the audience to ask us some questions. In the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, we have one question for Tomashi. Can you talk a little about the importance of music as it relates to your work and what influenced your musical choices, location, subject matter, etc.?
That's a great question. I'll be really brief because are we ending at 6?
We can go over a couple minutes.
Okay, so I'll be really brief and just say that my musical tastes are absolutely influenced by my mother, Ava Marie Burroughs, who's sick right now. And I'm just gonna ask everyone who's here, there's 92 people here, I'm just gonna ask that everyone keep my mother in your hearts tonight. She has impeccable taste in music, very eclectic and impeccable taste in music. And she's an engineer, and I grew up in an apartment in Los Angeles where our living room would always be outfitted with speakers that were wired near the ceiling so that the experience of music was a surrounding experience. So yeah, almost all of my shows are titled after albums. Time Out of Mind is the title of a Steely Dan song that we sang together all the time driving in Los Angeles, from the 1980 Gaucho album. She had the entire collection of the Ohio Players with their radically innovative album art. That music inspired me in making the work about voting rights in Ohio. The Land Claim actually is not titled after an album, but maybe one day someone will make a record called The Land Claim. The title for this show was inspired by a conversation with the brilliant Kelly Dennis of the Shinnecock Nation, who is also of the Watermill Center, who is the last person that I spoke to a year ago during my visit to the East End of Long Island. And she opened my eyes to the issue of claiming of land on the East End of Long Island since the colonists arrived at Conscience Point. So,
and we did a public program with you and Kelly and Kesu Park about land rights issues. So that is available on our website.
Yeah, we're kind of
and Tomashi, you also have an alter ego.
Oh God, Corinne.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah, I have another life. In music.
So maybe we'll get to see it.
Yeah. Minerva, what kind of music do you like to listen to?
Oh my gosh, all kind. No, it's just all over the map. Right now, a lot of Rosalia, just powerful, music that I can just move to, I guess, right now, anyway.
So we have another question. Thank you both so much for sharing. I admire who you are and what you do. Can you please share how we can support both of you and who you work with? And I think that will be a nice way to end our conversation. Who wants to go first, Minerva or Tomashi?
Okay, I will share a couple of things in the chat. So you'll have that right there. I think that could be helpful. You can certainly go to our website, which is OLA of Eastern Long Island.org, and I'll share some information right here. There are a number of initiatives that we're running right now on mental health, on other access points. I would love for you to reach out, 631-899-3441. And let us know what your interests are, how you would want to be involved. We're doing work with food and food crisis as well, of course. And we'd love to kind of fold you into this work. This work is for everyone, to be done by everyone, for everyone. So everyone is welcome.
Thank you so much, Minerva. And what can I say? I would say, please continue to support the work of the Parrish Museum, and please continue to support the work of the Watermill Center for the Arts. The work has continued even in isolation, and innovative practices and methods to create closeness during this time are happening because amazing people have not given up. Amazing people have not given up. So keep going to the website and taking advantage, showing up. It really matters. It matters. These counts matter. The registration for events matters. It literally lifts people's spirits when we show up, participate in the programming that people are continuing to conduct during this very difficult time. So just continue to support Watermill and continue to support the Parrish Museum. And I can always be found at the Tilton Gallery website or the Night Gallery website.
Thank you, Tomashi. I just got a question from Kelly Dennis, and I would like to put that to Minerva. What do you think of calling Tomashi's project local to this community, the Land Claim, and how this raises issues in the Latinx community?
The topic of, or the title of Land Claim?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think because what the land is for people, even this is borrowed land, stolen land, not even borrowed, it's stolen. And important distinction to also make between the folks who are, as Tomashi puts it, livelihood migration, many members of our Latinx community coming here, not because they just felt like taking a little trip to see some sights, but because their own space in their own country either was inhabitable or was not a space that they could feed their children in. So the reasons that migration exists and what this land means for those families that are very aware, and we all can be more aware of it, but that this is stolen land. But the use of this land and the honoring of this land to feed your families, to take care of your loved ones, to be the best person, to be the most contributing person you can be, to be a peaceful member of this community, but also actively and vociferously and fervently fight for justice and fight for equity. That's what I know that our Latinx members of our community understand this land to be an honor for them to be able to be on. This is and I feel like it's very important. I think it ties in perfectly because how important that is, how none of this is taken for granted.
Thank you. I'm gonna have the last question here from Edwin Ramoran, who says, in the need of stronger coalitions across race, class, immigration status, and gender, how important is organized labor in the work you both do?
Trying to unmute myself. Another opportunity to talk about my mother. My mother was a union member in Los Angeles, and I remember her always making it very clear to me the importance of unionized labor. When she became a part of that union, she was there for every conversation about every contract. I remember being a little girl with a drawing pad and pencil sitting in the back of smoky union halls. She was the only woman in the union at the time, an out lesbian Black woman in a predominantly, well, all male, predominantly white, and then Latinx and Filipino, and then with a smattering of Black men in this union. And labor is a part of who I am. Like understanding the value of labor is like literally who I am, or why I exist, I should say. It's why I get to exist. And labor is at the center of these conversations that we've had about lived experience of Latinx community, lived experience of Shinnecock people, and lived experience of Black people on the east end of Long Island, generationally and contemporarily. Labor, housing, transportation, they're all linked, and health and education links them all as well. Yeah, don't get me, got me all excited, Edwin, and we're trying to stop. We're trying to close out.
Right. Anyway, Minerva, did you want to add something to that?
Just briefly, I actually was raised by my grandparents. My grandfather was also a union guy, and just loved it. And I would go also to union meetings and sit in the back of the room. I will say that labor, because it's certainly not the only contributing force of our Latinx community, but it is certainly one of them, and a large one. And across the board, a lot of work that we end up doing has to do with wage theft, exploitation, threats, fear around work, but yet the call is to bring people out to do this work that everyone wants so desperately to be done by immigrant labor. And on the other side of that is many times the exploitation, the lack of worker safety, the lack of any kind of consistency across a siloed kind of set of municipalities, and navigation of laws that may or may not represent you based on who you are or what your status might be at the moment. And so labor is at the center of that. And we need to make sure that people have their basic human rights met, and their safety, and that they're not exploited. So it's the center of a lot of work that we do as well.
I just want to add one more thing about labor. I had an incredible opportunity to study informal labor economies with a woman named Martha Alter Chen. She's often referred to as like the go-to scholar anytime anyone's ready to write again or look again at issues of the Black market or the gray market. I'm mentioning her because I learned with her formally what I think I already know instinctively, that labor defines who we are. It's not just a matter of how our labor can financially benefit or materially benefit someone else. There's a psychological association that we as human beings have with the work that we do. It gives us our purpose in life. Mm-hmm. It's not haphazard, it's not superficial, and it's not casual. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote a book called All Labor Has Dignity during the Poor People's Campaign. So like this we have to continually come back to, because this issue of addressing, I feel like we keep coming into, but what we keep coming up against is an issue of selective humanism. You know, like I've been in classrooms where humanities are talked about. I've been in schools where the humanities are talked about, but it's not. But that full notion of humanism is not afforded to all of us. It is formally not afforded to all of us, systemically not afforded to everyone, and it creates discord for everyone. So labor is a part of understanding one's humanity. And valuing the labor that we do and that other people do is a part of valuing that person as a whole human being.
I think that's very well put, Tomashi. Thank you. And speaking of labor, I would like to thank also my colleagues, Jennifer Duque and Victor Miranda. And Victor is there. Can you show your face? He's doing all the wonderful tech. There's Victor. Thank you. And thank you, Minerva, and thank you, Tomashi, for this really important work that you do. And I look forward to having the show this summer. Thank you. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
That was great. Minerva, you're amazing.